This video is about an extraordinary person, George Coppin. We are bringing his story back to life because he deserves to be remembered, not sidelined in history. Coppin was the ultimate migrant, a man of vision, talent, and relentless drive. Arriving in the 1840s, he transformed Melbourne's entertainment scene, creating the city's first theatres and infusing the colony with excitement. But he didn't stop there. Coppin organised Australia's first hot air balloon flight, established some of Melbourne's best-known charitable institutions, expanded its first pleasure gardens, founded the seaside retreat of Sorrento, and entered politics to champion infrastructure and community welfare. He served as the president of the Carlton Football Club, introduced camels to Australia, and was credited with being the first to breed lions in the country. A man of many talents. The life journey that began on the 8th of April, 1819 in Sussex, England, ended on the 14th of March, 1906 in Australia, marked by exemplary milestones. Born to a father who left his medical profession to become a theatrical manager, Coppin's future in the theatre seemed destined from birth. Early on, he showed a keen interest in the stage, playing in orchestras at his father's theatres as a young boy. By age 16, he freed himself from parental control to make his own name, and by 18, he was already a stage manager, actor, and violinist at London's Woolwich Theatre. While acting at Dublin's Abbey Street Theatre, Coppin formed a close relationship with American actress Maria Watkins Burroughs, who was 9 years his senior. They decided to leave Europe for either America or Australia, with Maria favouring America. A coin toss decided their future, and Australia turned out to be the lucky destination. Coppin's Australian career began with his arrival in Sydney on the 10th of March, 1843. Shortly after, he arranged to perform at the Victoria Theatre on a profit-sharing basis, often earning upwards of £50 a night as his share. Though he made a small fortune from acting, he quickly lost it all in a hotel he purchased, a business misadventure of the inexperienced. He left Sydney empty-handed for Hobart. This pattern continued for the rest of his life. Whenever he made money on stage, he would soon lose it in business ventures. Coppin made his debut in Hobart Town on the 5th of January, 1845. After a successful season, he took on management in Launceston starting the 3rd of March, 1845. He ambitiously assembled a company of 12 performers, a scene painter, and 5 musicians, with whom he presented Lady of Lions at Melbourne's Queen's Theatre on the 21st of June, 1845. Leasing the theatre for a year, he enjoyed successful runs of Four Sisters and Turnpike Gate. Using the profits, he constructed a theatre in Adelaide within 5 weeks, converting the billiard room of the Temple Tavern at Shill Arcade into the new Queen's Theatre, which seated 700 people. He also established another theatre in Port Adelaide. In 1848, his longtime companion, Maria Watkins Burroughs, passed away after a brief illness at age 38. Coppin made a substantial fortune in Adelaide, only to lose it in copper mining ventures in Victoria. After going through insolvency proceedings, he returned to Melbourne with his creditors' permission and headed to the Victorian goldfields with no money in his pocket. Within 2 weeks, he left the goldfields empty-handed, but soon began a successful star engagement in Geelong in 1852, where he once again made a small fortune entertaining the diggers. Coppin retired from management for a time and visited Adelaide, where he invited his creditors to dinner and repaid them 20 shillings for each pound he owed before sailing to England in January 1854. In Birmingham, he met the tragedian Gustav Brooke and arranged engagements with him and other professionals to perform in Australia. He also commissioned a prefabricated iron theatre to bring to Melbourne, which was manufactured by Bell House and Company in Manchester and shipped to Australia. Upon returning to Melbourne, Coppin began performing at the Old Queen's Theatre on the 18th of December, 1854. G. V. Brooke appeared at the same theatre on the 26th of February, 1855, and laid the foundation stone of the Olympic Theatre on the 18th of April, 1855. Remarkably, the Olympic Theatre was erected in just 6 weeks at the southeast corner of Lonsdale and Exhibition Streets, with a capacity of 1,150. Nicknamed the Iron Pot, the Olympic Theatre opened in early June, with its first performance led by Wizard Jacobs. It was here that Brooke achieved some of his greatest triumphs. Initially, Coppin employed Brooke for a season at a salary of £10,000, but they soon became partners. In August 1855, Coppin married Harriet Hilsden, Brooke's sister-in-law. The establishment of the Theatre Royal by John Black, located between Swanston and Russell Streets, where Maya now stands, presented strong competition to the Olympic Theatre. Eventually, the Olympic Theatre was converted into a gymnasium and Turkish baths, but was destroyed by fire in 1866. Today, the Comedy Theatre stands on this historic site. Brooke and Coppin entered into partnership, and in September 1855, Lola Montez performed her erotic spider dance at the Theatre Royal. The Argus reported the next day that her performance was utterly subversive to all ideas of public morality. As a result, respected families began avoiding the theatre, leading to significant financial losses. Additionally, a prostitution ring developed around the Theatre Royal and the adjoining Royal Hotel, where prostitutes took clients to nearby dens, and the area became known as Saddling Paddock. Consequently, owner John Black went bankrupt, and the Theatre Royal was taken over by George Coppin and Gustav Brooke in 1856. The duo attempted to remove the stigma of prostitution from the Theatre Royal by opening the first grand opera season ever held in the Australian colonies, featuring Anna Bishop, who attracted large audiences. However, the venture ultimately failed, with Coppin losing £3,000. In 1858, Coppin entered politics. In April of that year, he was elected to the Richmond Municipal Council, and in October, he was elected to represent the South Western Province in the Legislative Council. He dissolved his partnership with Brooke in 1859, leaving Brooke to manage the Royal Hotel and Theatre Royal while Coppin retained the Olympic Theatre and Cremorne Gardens. Coppin converted the Olympic into Melbourne's first Turkish baths. Meanwhile, Brooke and the Theatre Royal sank deeper into debt, prompting Coppin to settle those debts. Gustav Brooke proved to be a poor manager and fell into alcoholism. He eventually returned to London, but drowned when his ship sank in 1866. Tragedy struck Coppin again, when his wife Harriet died in September 1859, shortly after the birth of their third child. In 1861, Coppin married Lucy Haldon, Harriet's 18-year-old daughter from a previous marriage. Their first child was born just 7 months later. Cremorne Gardens were opened in 1853 in the banks of Yarra River, at Richmond by Englishman James Ellis. Then known as Pleasure Gardens, Cremorne Gardens were equivalent of today's amusement parks. A separate company was formed to operate paddle steamer gondola, which brought hundreds of passengers to the pleasure garden, and the business was good. His gardens featured a charming tea room, a menagerie that housed elephants, monkeys, bears, lions, and tigers, as well as a brass band and a dancing rotunda. Visitors could enjoy drinks at 3 bars and climb staircases winding around tall trees for stunning views of the Yarra River and early Melbourne. There was also a picturesque lake and a maze for exploration. In addition, a circus showcased performing horses and thrilling nightly tightrope acts suspended high above the lake. Evenings concluded with a spectacular fireworks display. At the entrance, visitors were charged a fee of between £0.50 and £1. Liquor was available, along with the services of sex workers. However, this raised the ire of conscience patrol groups in Melbourne. These allied evangelicals ensured that a law was passed forbidding the sale of alcoholic drinks on Sundays, which negatively impacted the garden's profitability. The gardens were sold to W.P. Scott in 1855, and George Coppin and Gustavus Brooke became joint proprietors in 1856. The gardens opened every day of the week from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. By 1857, Coppin had already spent around £100,000 on Cremorne Gardens. He was credited with bringing camels to Australia for the first time and for breeding lions in the country. In 1859, Coppin lobbied for a railway station to be built to the east of the gardens, providing visitors with easier access to the site. That same year, he imported 6 camels from Aden as exhibits for the Cremorne Gardens menagerie, and in 1860, he sold them to the Exploration Committee of the Royal Society of Victoria, who used them on the Burke and Wills expedition. Cremorne Gardens featured a stage where plays and pantomimes were performed nightly, as well as a dance hall with a brass band playing in the rotunda. There were 2 hotels within the grounds, and once a year, a day and night fair ensured fun for every taste. It was from Cremorne Gardens that the first balloon ascended in Melbourne. During a visit to England, Coppin purchased a large gas balloon, which he named the Australasian. He brought out 2 aeronauts from England, Captain Joseph Dean and Professor Charles Brown, who made regular ascents in balloons. On the 1st of February, 1858, the balloon was partially filled with gas at the Melbourne Gas Works and then transported by dray, with the help of 30 men, to Cremorne, where it was fully inflated. A huge crowd gathered to watch the spectacle. The Australasian rose from the gardens to 3,000 feet, flew for half an hour, and landed on Heidelbeck Road. Dean and Brown made many flights in Melbourne and Sydney afterward. In 1859, Coppin became the sole owner of Cremorne Gardens, while Gustavus Brooke took over the Theatre Royal. However, the venture was draining Coppin's resources more quickly than he anticipated. In 1863, the gates of Cremorne Gardens closed for the final time, and the gardens were sold to Dr. James Harcourt for £4,500. They were sold again in the 1880s and subsequently subdivided. The gardens served as a gathering place for the trade union's 8 hours day celebrations, including processions and picnics. On the 21st of April, 1857, workers and their families assembled there after marching through the city. Although the gardens later closed, Coppin reopened them on the 21st of April, 1863 for another 8 hours day event. Coppin built the Haymarket Theatre, located near the Eastern Market on Burke Street, which opened on the 15th of September, 1862 with the play Our American Cousin. The building incorporated the Apollo Music Hall, which had opened on the 5th of July, 1862, featuring a program that included Madame Carandini. The Apollo Music Hall also boasted a roller skating rink, the first in Australia. The Argus wrote on the 8th of June, 1866, for its introduction into Australia, we are indebted to Mr. George Coppin, and as this is not the only contribution Australia owes to the same energetic mind, it is satisfactory to know that this enterprise, at all events, needs no extraneous assistance to ensure its thorough success. The Shakespeare Window, a stained glass window depicting the figure of Shakespeare, from the Apollo Music Hall, was moved to Coppin's private home in the 1870s. Coppin's daughter, Lucy Coppin, later donated the window to the State Library of Victoria, where it is now on display for public viewing. The Haymarket Theatre had the capacity to accommodate 2,500 people, with 1,800 in the stalls and an additional 400 that could be squeezed in if necessary. It opened with a season featuring the American actor Joseph Jefferson, but the opening night did not attract a large society audience. Overspending on its construction pushed Coppin close to bankruptcy. The following year, he secured the talents of Charles Keane, Queen Victoria's director of private theatricals, and his actress wife, Ellen, who starred in productions at the New Theatre. The profits from these shows saved Coppin from impending financial ruin. Coppin then renovated and rechristened the theatre, renaming it the Duke of Edinburgh Theatre in 1867 in honour of a visit from the first royal personage to tour the colonies. However, the theatre remained empty for weeks until it was burned to the ground at the end of 1871. In the meantime, Coppin had once again taken over the Theatre Royal after a brief visit to America, and later achieved distinct success by introducing Mr. and Mrs. Charles Matthews. In 1872, the Royal was destroyed by fire, but within 4 months, Coppin had built another theatre on the site. In 1874, Coppin was elected to the Victorian Legislative Assembly for South Melbourne. He introduced the Torrens Act and the Savings Bank Act into the Legislative Council. Opposing payment for members, he practiced his principles by distributing his parliamentary salary of £300 among various charities. Coppin was twice elected to the Victorian Legislative Council and served as a member of the Legislative Assembly. He was also a councillor for the Richmond municipality, serving twice as its mayor. Additionally, he was one of the founding members of Sorrento, the site of the first attempted settlement, and served as a bank director, as well as the founder of the Dramatic and Musical Association. Coppin is credited with building 6 theatres in Australia and played a key role in bringing around 200 artists from England and America to the country. He was the originator of the Gordon House Institution, initially intended to house the homeless. Additionally, Coppin served as a director of the Commercial Bank in Melbourne and the British and Tasmanian iron mines. He was the chairman of the Ocean Amphitheatre Company, the Continental Hotel Company, and the Purveyors Association. Coppin had grand plans for the seaside township of Sorrento, where he owned a holiday home. He was behind the establishment of the Sorrento Ocean Amphitheatre Company in 1870, which sold land allotments in Sorrento and developed the area by building roads and other facilities. The Ladies' Baths, established in Sorrento in 1874, was later purchased by the Sorrento Sea Baths Company, founded by Coppin in 1888. The Ladies' Baths were expanded, improved, and renamed the Sorrento Sea Baths. In 1874, Coppin founded the Sorrento Queenscliff Steam Navigation Company, which operated the Golden Crown between Port Melbourne, Sorrento, and Queenscliff. The intention was to make travel to Sorrento more affordable for the general public. The success of the navigation company led him to invest in the Sorrento Tramway Company in May 1889. The tramway operated from Front Beach to Back Beach. The steam tram typically ran only during the season, from Derby Day until the first Sunday after Easter, aligning with the operations of bay excursion steamers. During the season, horse tram services operated between 9:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m., and between 7 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. During the off-season, only the horse tram was in operation. In October 1903, Coppin sold his interest in the tramway company to a local syndicate headed by Isaac Bensalem. Coppin held honorary positions as the director of the Richmond Free Dispensary and the vice-chairman of the Old Colonists Association. A true philanthropist, he supported numerous charitable institutions, including the establishment of the Victorian Humane Society in 1874. George Coppin, along with Charles Strong, a minister at the Scots Church in Melbourne, established Coppin's lodging house, which later became Gordon House. The intention was to provide cheap, but comfortable housing for working-class families in Melbourne. They believed tenement dwellings for poor need not be dark, dirty and substandard. Instead, with proper planning and sound management, could be spacious, airy, bright and convenient. The Old Colonists Association was formed in 1869 by a group of prominent Melbourne identities, led by Coppin, to assist elderly Victorians in needy circumstances. In 1883, Coppin presided over the first meeting, which set up a steering committee for the establishment of the Melbourne branch of St John Ambulance Association, which was initiated by Neild and Dr. Richard Warren of Brighton. Coppin's achievements doesn't end there. He was elected the president of Carlton Football Club in March 1866. Coppin was elected president from 1867 to 1872. Coppin remained as patron of the club until 1877. George Coppin, the great Australian, passed away on the 14th of March, 1906 at the age of 87 years. He left an estate valued at £9,709.